Pack your things and get out of my daughter's life and take your junk with you. That's what my son-in-law said to me on Thanksgiving Day, standing in my own living room at the table I'd built with my own hands 30 years ago. He said it loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the walls. He forgot, or maybe he never cared, whose name was on the deed. Before we get into everything that followed, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. I'd love to know who's listening. The turkey had been in the oven since 6 that morning. I'm the kind of man who brines overnight, who gets up before the sun to check the temperature, who makes the gravy from scratch because my late wife, Patricia, taught me that store-bought is a shortcut you can taste. She passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. I've made Thanksgiving dinner alone every year since, but I've never stopped making it her way. My daughter Tara had moved back in 14 months before that November. She and her husband Clifton had hit a rough patch, his words when they showed up with a U-Haul on a Tuesday evening and 2 car seats in the back. Our restaurant didn't make it through COVID, Dad. We just need a few months to stabilize. Tara had that look she'd had as a little girl when she broke something and hoped I wouldn't notice. Clifton stood behind her with his arms crossed, the way a man stands when he's being dragged somewhere he didn't choose. "Come in," I told them. "Stay as long as you need." I had the room. 3-bedroom house in Maplewood, New Jersey, bought in 1994, paid off in 2009. Patricia's garden still grew along the fence every spring, more stubborn than anyone gave it credit for. The grandkids, Noah, 7, and Isla, 4, tumbled through the front door like they owned the place. In a way, I wanted them to feel that. This is your family's house, Grandpa's house. You're always welcome here. That first month was fine. Not perfect, but fine. Clifton was polite in the way that men are polite when they're tolerating something. He said thank you at dinner and helped carry groceries in from the car once. Tara cooked twice a week and cleaned up after the kids on the weekends. I told myself this was what family did. You show up for each other. Patricia always said that. She meant it without conditions attached. The conditions started around month 3. Clifton began working from home, which I understood. The economy was strange still, opportunities were scarce. But working from home became occupying the house. He started leaving his equipment across the dining room table. Monitors, cables, a standing desk he assembled in the corner without asking. He changed the Wi-Fi password because, he explained, he needed to prioritize bandwidth for his video calls. I found this out when I tried to check my email and couldn't get online. I mentioned it quietly. He changed it back, but he gave me the new password with the tone you use when you're explaining something to someone who doesn't fully understand. Small things accumulated the way small things do. The television in the living room, which I'd bought in 2018 after Patricia's old set finally died, started defaulting to Clifton's streaming accounts. My chair, a recliner I'd had for 15 years, the one that had the perfect groove worn into the left armrest, became where Clifton sat to watch football. I started using the kitchen chair. Month 6, I overheard Tara on the phone with her sister. She doesn't know I was in the hallway. She was saying, "Dad's okay, he's just kind of in the way sometimes. He hovers." I went back to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed for a while. I had a friend named Pete Johansson, retired high school principal, widower like me, lived 4 blocks over. We walked every Thursday morning, 5 miles through Maplewood and into South Orange and back. I told Pete about the hovering comet on one of those walks. The leaves were coming down around us, early October, that sharp smell in the air that always reminded me of football games. Pete said, "Ray, you're a retired accountant who kept records for 35 years. You know what this is going to look like in 12 months. I did know. I just wasn't ready to see it yet." By month 9, Clifton had stopped saying thank you at dinner. He'd started referring to the house as our place in conversations I wasn't meant to hear. He told one of his friends on the phone, "Yeah, we've got a good setup here. Decent space for the kids. No mention of whose space. No mention of who paid the mortgage for 15 years after the market crash nearly wiped me out. I kept records anyway. Old habit. I noted when the utility bills climbed, electric up 40%, water nearly double with 2 more kids in the house. I tracked the grocery bills, which I paid entirely because Clifton's income was irregular, and Tara's part-time bookkeeping work barely covered their car insurance. I didn't say anything about the money. Patricia would have told me not to keep score. But I kept the records because I knew, somewhere in the back of my mind, that I might need them. The Thanksgiving argument started before Clifton ever raised his voice. It started when I came downstairs at 6:30 in the morning to find Clifton's brother Marcus, a man I'd met twice, sitting at my kitchen counter drinking my coffee and scrolling through his phone. Clifton had invited him and his wife and their 3 kids without telling me. He also invited 2 couples from their old restaurant days, people I'd never met, and a woman named Denise, who was apparently an old friend of Tara's from college, but who I hadn't seen at the house before. By the time I figured out what was happening, there were 11 people in my house, 2 of whom were rearranging the furniture in the living room so there'd be more seating. Someone had already opened the good wine, a bottle I'd been saving since 2019, a Napa Cabernet I'd bought at an estate sale. It was half gone. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the turkey I'd been tending since before sunrise and felt something I hadn't felt in 14 months. I felt like the hired help. Tara floated past me in a new dress, playing hostess. She touched my arm briefly and said, "Dad, isn't this great? We haven't had a real Thanksgiving in years." I started to say that I had made Thanksgiving every year, alone in this kitchen, that Patricia and I had hosted 30 of them in this house, but Tara was already gone, laughing at something Denise had said. I set the table. My table, a drop-leaf walnut table that had been in my family since 1978, that my father refinished in his garage the year before he died, that had 6 leaves and could seat 14, and had held every significant meal of my adult life. I set it for 12, because that was how many people appeared to be staying. When dinner was ready and everyone came to sit down, the seating had been arranged in a way that left me at the far end, near the kitchen, not at the head, not in the chair where I'd sat for 3 decades. I walked to my usual seat and reached for the back of it. Clifton was already talking to Marcus's wife, gesturing expansively about something, but he noticed. He noticed the way men notice when they're watching for it. He stood up fast, not loud yet, just standing, hand out. "Hey, Ray, we set the table a certain way. This seat's taken." I looked at him. I said, "I've sat in this chair at this table since before your wife was born." He stepped closer. His voice dropped, but it didn't get quieter. It got harder. "Listen, I'm trying to host a nice dinner for our family and our friends. Don't make this difficult. You want to eat. There's a chair right there." He pointed toward the kitchen. Someone at the table had gone very still. I could feel it without looking, the way you feel a room hold its breath. I said quietly, "Clifton, whose house do you think you're standing in right now?" He laughed. Not a good laugh. The kind that's meant to make the other person feel small. "Ray, you're a guest at your own family's Thanksgiving. Be grateful we include you. Why don't you go check on the turkey? Be grateful we include you. I worked since I was 16 years old. I put myself through Rutgers. I spent 31 years at the same accounting firm, made partner, raised 2 daughters after my wife got sick the first time, and stayed present through every school play and every heartbreak and every ordinary Tuesday that makes up a life. I owned this house. I paid for this dinner. I brined that turkey for 24 hours, and my son-in-law told me to be grateful they included me. I stood up straight. I looked at Tara. She was looking at her plate. I walked to the front closet and got my coat. I heard Clifton behind me saying something about how I was being dramatic. I didn't answer. I opened the front door, my front door with the storm glass I'd replaced in 2017, and I stepped outside into the cold November air. I sat on the porch steps for about 4 minutes. I looked at the street I'd lived on for 30 years. The Hendersons' house across the way with the inflatable turkey they put out every year. The oak tree at the corner that had grown from a sapling into something my grandkids couldn't wrap their arms around. Then I went back inside. I want everyone who is not an immediate member of this household to gather their things and leave now. I said it from the doorway. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My name is Raymond Calvert. This is my house. I own it. I pay for it. And you are all guests in it who were invited without my knowledge. I need you to go." Clifton started up immediately. "You're embarrassing yourself. These are our friends." I looked at him. Then I took my phone out of my coat pocket. "You have about 5 minutes," I said. "After that, I'm calling the Maplewood Police non-emergency line and letting them know I have people in my home who aren't authorized to be here. One of the couples was already getting up. I could see it, the quick calculation people make. This is not our family's fight, and we don't want to be here when it gets worse. They were polite about it. They thanked me, actually. Thanked me. I shook their hands. Marcus's wife was gathering the kids with that efficient don't-ask-questions movement mothers have. Clifton stood with his fists at his sides. You're insane. You know that? You're a lonely old man and you're ruining everything because you can't stand that we have a life here. The room emptied in 8 minutes. 11 people gone. The turkey sat on the counter getting cold. The good wine was mostly gone. The table I'd set had half-eaten rolls on it and napkins left like signals of surrender. It was just us three. Me, Tara, and Clifton. Tara was crying. Not quietly. She was sitting at the table with her hands over her face, making a sound I hadn't heard from her since she was 10 years old, and broke her arm falling off a bike. I love you, I said to her. I have loved you every day of your life, and I will love you every day of your life, and I will love you until I die. But this is my house, and I need you and Clifton to find somewhere else to live. You have 30 days. Clifton came toward me, not threatening, just close. His voice had dropped to that low register men use when they're trying to control a room. You can't do this. We live here. We have kids. You can't just throw us out. I can, I said, and I am. 30 days. I'd suggest you use the time wisely. He called me things after that. I won't repeat most of them. I went upstairs, sat in the chair in my bedroom, and called Pete Johnson. Pete answered on the second ring. I told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll be there in 20 minutes with leftovers. His daughter had cooked too much. She always did. We ate at my kitchen table that night, Pete and I, surrounded by the leftover traces of a Thanksgiving that had turned into something else. The turkey was still good. I'd made it right. The next morning I called a locksmith. New hardware for all 3 exterior doors, different key for each one. The locksmith, a man named Gary who'd been in business since the 90s, didn't ask why. He'd seen enough. He said, you want the deadbolts upgraded too? I said yes to everything. I also called my younger daughter, Noreen, in Phoenix. She'd suspected things were difficult. She wasn't surprised. She was angry on my behalf in that particular way. Younger daughters have, quick and certain and absolute. She asked if I needed her to fly out. Not yet, I told her. Let me see how the next 30 days go. The 30 days were not quiet. Clifton told anyone who would listen that I was having a breakdown, that grief over Patricia had finally caught up with me, that I'd lost perspective. He said this to my neighbor across the street. He said it to Tara's sister. He said it loudly on the phone one morning while I was making coffee and apparently forgot I was 20 feet away. Tara was more complicated. She apologized twice. Both times felt real, but she didn't disagree with Clifton in front of me, and she didn't contradict his version of events with anyone who came asking. Silence is its own kind of answer. I spent those 30 days doing something I should have done month 3. I went through everything and wrote it down. Not for revenge, I want to be clear about that, but because I've spent my career in accounting and I know that documentation is the difference between a claim and a fact. 14 months of utility overage. I calculated the increase against my historical averages and arrived at $4,200 in additional electricity, water, and heating costs. Groceries, I'd been buying for 4 adults and 2 children on a budget built for 1 person. Conservative estimate, $6,800 in 14 months. I'd also lent Clifton money twice, $1,200 in March for a car repair and $2,000 in July when a freelance payment fell through. He'd signed nothing. I'd sent the money via Zelle, which kept its own records. I added it up, just over $14,000, documented. Pete's wife had been a family law attorney before she retired. Pete called her and asked her to take a look at my situation. She said what I already suspected, without a lease, without formal tenancy, and with clear documentation of ownership, they had no legal standing to stay once I'd asked them to leave. She recommended I send a formal 30-day notice in writing. I did, certified mail, the day after Thanksgiving. On day 29, they moved out. Not because they wanted to, because Noreen flew in from Phoenix on day 26 and had a conversation with Tara that I was not party to, but that resulted in Tara telling Clifton they were leaving. Clifton left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. It said, You win, old man. Enjoy your empty house. I folded it and put it in the manila folder with the rest of the documentation. The house was quiet in a way that took some adjusting to. I walked through the rooms the first night and picked up the small things they'd left behind. A set of coasters, a kid's drawing of a dog that Noah had made and taped to the refrigerator. I kept the drawing. Pete came for chess on Sunday like he always did. We sat at the walnut table and I made coffee, and we didn't talk about Clifton for most of the evening. Then Pete asked if I'd thought about pursuing the money. I said I'd thought about it. $14,000 wasn't nothing. I'm on a fixed income, Social Security, and a pension from the firm, which is comfortable but not extravagant. $14,000 was most of a year's discretionary spending. But more than the money, I thought about what Pete's wife had said. Document everything. I already had. I filed in small claims court. New Jersey's limit at the time was $20,000. I was well within it. The filing fee was $75. I did the paperwork myself. 31 years of accounting means legal documents don't frighten me. Clifton was served 2 weeks later at the apartment they'd rented in Bloomfield. I know this because he called me furious about 4 minutes after the process server left. He said, "You're seriously doing this?" I said, "I seriously am." He said, "We're family." I said, "Family pays their debts." He said, "You'll never see a dime, and you're going to look like a fool in front of a judge." I said, "I'll see you in court," and I hung up. They showed up without a lawyer. Clifton wore a tie that didn't match his shirt. Tara sat beside him and didn't look at me. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with reading glasses on a chain, and the specific patience of someone who'd heard every variety of domestic dispute the state of New Jersey could produce. Clifton's argument was essentially that the money was a gift, that family members didn't charge each other for hospitality, and that I was retaliating emotionally for a dinner argument. The judge asked him if he had any documentation showing the money was a gift. He said it was understood. She asked me for mine. I handed the clerk the folder: bank statements, Zelle transfer records, utility bills with year-over-year comparisons, grocery receipts organized by month, and a printed email from Tara sent 9 months into their stay that said, "Dad, thank you for carrying us through this. We'll pay you back when we're back on our feet. I promise." The judge read that email twice. She ruled in my favor. Full amount, plus filing costs. Payment to begin within 60 days, $200 a month. Clifton stood up too fast when the ruling came, said something under his breath that the judge caught. She gave him a look that could have stopped traffic. He sat back down. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Tara waited while Clifton went ahead. She came toward me slowly, like someone walking across ice. She looked the way people look when they've been awake for too many nights in a row. She said, "I should have spoken up at Thanksgiving, when he told you to go check on the turkey. I should have said something. I waited," she said. "I was embarrassed. Of him, mostly. But I let you take it, and that wasn't fair. I looked at my daughter. She has Patricia's eyes. She always has, that particular shade of gray that looks different depending on the light. I said, 'I know.' She said, 'I'm sorry, Dad.' Really, I believed her. I believe her still. We're not where we were. Trust is a specific thing. Not a feeling, but a practice. Something you do over time, not something you declare and have it be so. She calls on Sundays now. She came for Christmas, alone. Clifton did not come. I don't know the details of what's happening between them, and it's not my business, unless she makes it my business. Noah and Isla come every other weekend when Tara brings them. Noah has started asking to help me cook. He stood next to me last month, and we made Patricia's pot roast together, the one with the rosemary and the whole garlic cloves that you put in at the start. He stirred the pot very seriously, like it mattered. It did matter. Isla found the dog drawing she'd taped to the refrigerator and asked why it was still there. I told her because I liked it. She drew me another one, a bigger dog this time, with a red collar. I taped it next to the first one. Pete and I still walk on Thursdays, 5 miles, Maplewood into South Orange and back. The leaves have come down again, and the air smells the way it always does this time of year. We don't talk about Clifton anymore. There's not much left to say. Pete asked me one morning, not long after the court date, if I thought I'd done the right thing. All of it, the locksmith, the 30-day notice, the small claims filing. I said I thought about it differently than that. He asked how. I said Patricia used to tell me that a home is the one place where you're supposed to be completely yourself. No performance, no apology, no shrinking. I shrunk for 14 months. I apologized for existing in my own kitchen. I let a man eat my food and sit in my chair and tell me I should be grateful for it. I said, so I stopped. Pete was quiet for most of the next block. Then he said, she would have been proud of you. I know she would have been. I carry that with me. The house is mine again completely. The walnut table is still there, still set for whatever occasion comes. The good wine is gone, but I bought more. Patricia's garden is dormant now, the way it always is in November, but it'll come back in the spring. It always does. I'm not lonely. I want to be clear about that. Lonely is what Clifton wanted me to feel when he left that note. Lonely is what he thought would vindicate him. I'm not lonely. I'm alone in the way that a man can be alone in his own house on a quiet evening and feel the particular peace of a space that belongs entirely to him. That peace is worth more than I can tell you. I didn't understand what I'd given it up for until I got it back. That is the only revenge I wanted. That and the $200 a month. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the courtroom, not the locksmith, not even Thanksgiving itself. It's the 4 minutes I sat on my own porch steps in the cold, looking at the street I'd lived on for 30 years, deciding what kind of man I still wanted to be. I think about how long I waited before that moment. 14 months of shrinking. 14 months of giving up my chair, my table, my mornings, my silence. I told myself it was patience. I told myself it was love. And some of it was, but some of it was something else, a habit of making myself small so that other people could feel comfortable. That habit cost me more than $14,000. It cost me the better part of a year of my own life inside my own home. What Clifton did was wrong. That's simple, but what I allowed, the quiet accumulation of it, the excuses I made, the way I stepped aside and told myself it was temporary, that was on me. I had the power to draw a line from month one. I didn't. And the longer I waited, the more natural it became for everyone in that house to treat my generosity as a given rather than a gift. I've spent a long time thinking about what finally made me stand up. It wasn't the stolen wine, though that stung. It wasn't even being told to check on the turkey in my own kitchen. It was the silence. Tara sitting at that table with her eyes down, not saying a word. Because I realized in that moment that I'd raised her to know better, and she'd made a choice. That clarity was the thing that moved my feet. Here's what I understand now that I didn't fully understand then. The way you treat people teaches them how to treat you. I modeled patience that looked like permission. I modeled generosity that looked like inexhaustibility. And Clifton, being the kind of man he is, took everything that looked available. That's not an excuse for him. It's a fact about cause and effect. When I stopped making myself available to be taken from, the whole dynamic collapsed. Because it had only ever worked with my cooperation. What saved me wasn't anger. Anger came and went. I'm 63 years old. I've learned that anger without a plan is just noise. What saved me was the habit of mind I'd built over 31 years of accounting. Document everything. Measure what you can measure. Don't act on feeling alone. Act when you have the facts to back it up. When I finally moved, I moved with everything I needed. That's not coldness. That's intelligence applied to a situation that deserved it. And it took something I hadn't expected to need. The willingness to accept that a painful outcome might be the right one. Tara sleeping in a harder life for a while, paying $200 a month for years, rebuilding something she let herself break. I didn't enjoy any of that. I'm her father. But I held to it anyway, because the alternative was teaching her that there are no consequences for choosing silence when someone you love is being diminished. That lesson would have followed her and those grandchildren for the rest of their lives. The walnut table is still in the dining room. Noah stirs the pot roast now on weekends and takes it very seriously. Isla's dog drawing is on the refrigerator next to the first one. That's not a small thing. That's everything.